Welcome, everyone. Hope everyone is doing very well. We're very excited to present this Introduction to Ethics Olympiads for you. We're going to talk about a few things today. Here is the structure of the seminar. First, we'll talk about the match format and give you an overall sense of what an Olympiad is, maybe a little bit about philosophy. We'll talk about the overview of the two sort of tournament streams that we run and the slight differences between them. Then the most exciting part of the day, and I think probably a really useful part for you, we're going to go through every single part of an actual Olympiad. We're going to talk about how to do it. Then we're going to demonstrate doing it. And then obviously we'll take all of your questions at the end. So that means we're going to go through the presentation part, the commentary part, the responses, and then also the judges' questions. Before we do, let me just introduce you to the other people who will be part of this. So I'm Archie Stapleton. I have a master's degree from Harvard in theological studies. I did basically Buddhist philosophy and Sanskrit. I have an undergrad in philosophy from University of British Columbia, and I co-founded the Pan-Am and Ethics Olympiad. Zach Bloom here, we went to undergrad together, actually. That's where we met, on the first day of undergrad, playing Frisbee with one another. And we've been friends and colleagues ever since. He has an undergrad also from UBC with an honors degree, and then a master's from UBC as well in, I think, the philosophy of logic. Is that more or less right? Metaphysics and logic? Yeah, good. Oriana's going to be speaking with us as well. Her main claim to fame in terms of the Olympiad was the champion of the International Olympiad, and is a phenomenal Olympian, ethics Olympian, as we say, and has even helped me with the training of hundreds of Australian students in the Australian Ethics Olympiad training. So a brilliant addition to the team. And Mars, who may know, oh, he is down there as well. Yeah, he is a graduate from Harvard Philosophy. There he is. And hello, Oriana. Hello, Mars. So he is a graduate from Harvard with a degree in philosophy. I believe he focused on contemporary political philosophy, ethics, and metaphysics, and he explored free will and rationality in his undergrad thesis. He's also a champion debater. It would take too long to go through all of his accomplishments there. Okay, with that in mind, let's launch straight into it. Let's talk about the match format and what an Olympiad really is. So, in an Olympiad, you have two teams of 3 to 5 students, literally at any age. So they could be grade 6 through 12, obviously tends to be in the sort of upper middle to high school range that we tend to get. Perhaps soon we'll split these into multiple competitions and we'll have a middle school competition if there's enough demand. But for now, you have 2 teams. And before you get to the competition, you'll have 8 ethical cases given to you in a document once you've registered for the competition. These cases are all about a page long. You're going to see an example of one of these in just a minute. You're going to read through all of these. You're going to look at the discussion questions. You're going to plan it all out with your team members. You're going to think about how you'd respond to various different types of questions on the topic. Then, when you get in on the day, you are going to be sent to a breakout room with another team and a judge, the judge moderator. You are going to then have a coin toss where the judge says, hey, pick heads or tails. One team calls it. If they win, they get to say whether they'd like to be team A or team B first. That just means whether they're going to be the presenting team first or the commenting team first. And there's no actual benefit to either side of this. It really doesn't matter which one you pick because you don't know what case you've got and you don't know what question you've got when you do this coin toss. And the rounds are perfectly symmetrical in that there's no benefit to being first or second at all. Okay. Then the coin toss happens. You know whether you're going to be team A or team B. If you're team A, what happens next is the judge clicks next on their presentation and the case comes up, one of these 8 cases. And they read the case and then they click next again and then a specific question pops up. And this is important. The question that comes up at that stage might not be one of the 3 discussion questions, okay? Especially if you're in a finals round of an Olympiad. We've got a finals that I'll talk about in a second coming up in August. If you're in that, you can almost expect that the topics are going to be a little bit more difficult than the basic questions because you're in, a higher level round, okay? They can be really about anything. Obviously, they tend to be very related to the case, but they could be quite an abstract question that isn't directly related to the case, and you might have to make the connections to the case, all right? Or they might be really case specific. You just don't know. That's why you have to prepare in quite a broad way. Prepare quite a lot. Okay, then Once you've got the specific question, judge reads it twice, then they start a timer for 3 minutes. And that's where you, in your team, Team A, get to prepare their presentation. So you have 3 minutes preparation time, as you're going to see Oriana and I do a little later. These 3 minutes are quite difficult and intense. We'll talk about how to approach them later on in the presentation. After that, Team A then gives a 5-minute presentation. So we're over here, Team A, 5-minute presentation. That's going to answer the question, and we'll go through all the different components that it should have in a little bit. After that, Team B gets 1 minute to confer with one another. Who's going to say what? You want to respond to this? You want to respond to that? And then they give a commentary to Team A's presentation. And as we'll talk about later, that commentary does not have to be rebuttal at all. It almost shouldn't sound like you're attacking Team A's presentation. We'll talk more about it. Then Team A gets another minute to confer with one another, and then they respond to the commentary also in 3 minutes. Now we get to what I think is by far the coolest, most interesting, and probably the best, pedagogically speaking, part of the Olympiad. That is judges' questions. So our judge is going to be Mars today. And he, I presume, given who he's going to be asking questions to, isn't going to pull any punches. And when I'm a judge of an Olympiad, I don't pull any punches. What we do is treat you like academic philosophers, okay? And we ask you all the questions we would ask to genuine high-level PhD philosophers, all right? That's how we treat you, and that is such fun. We'll talk about how to get around the difficulty of that and why you shouldn't be nervous about it, why you should treat it as a great, like, fun part of the experience based on the way you're judged here. But don't be nervous, be excited that you get to talk to like really high-level philosophers for 7 minutes about your case. Okay. Then the judge is going to write some notes. They're going to score each team based on how they performed there. And then you're going to repeat the process in reverse, where Team A becomes Team B, Team B becomes Team A. And importantly, you get a new case and a new question, and you go again. Let's go straight on to the two different types of events, because they are slightly different in important ways, and it's worth understanding the differences between the two, okay? So structurally, they're identical. The format that I just told you about, that is true for both of these. It's the same format of competition. The differences are about other components that we'll talk about right now. So if you look at the Pan-American Olympiad, Pan-American Ethics Olympiad, this is actually like the sort of original type of Olympiad, and it started in Australia. And so the International Ethics Olympiad is held out of Australia. That international one has teams who qualify for it from Australia, New Zealand, China, Singapore, Korea, India, and now, well, like for a while now, North America as well. And I'll have you know, the North American teams who you'll be representing have won, I believe, 3 of the last 5 of these International Ethics Olympiads. So no pressure, but a little bit of pressure. You guys are the best of the best. So the way it works is this. We have an event coming up on May 17th, and actually the registration has been extended for that. So we were going to have the registration deadline tonight. We decided to extend it by 1 whole week. So if you still want to submit more teams or you need to get your registration in, you now have a week to do that. And if you place in the top few teams, we're actually not exact, it depends how many people register for how many teams we get to send to the international. But if you are in the top few teams there, you will qualify for the International Ethics Olympiad, which is the biggest ethics Olympiad on the planet, by the way. And that happens in July at like 6 p.m. EST. It's Australia time, so it'll go a little bit late into the night, but not too bad. Aside from that, you'll notice that the top 8 teams of the Pan-American Ethics Olympiad also qualify for the other final, which is the TKEthics Grand Final, which is in August 29th, 6 p.m. EST. Okay, and I'll explain what that is in just a second. But so if you do well at the upcoming Olympiad, you also qualify for the TKEthics Grand Final. Okay. The topics for the Pan-American are general. So they can be any kind of ethical question. They could be political philosophy. They could be, about religion. They could be about sectarianism. Really anything at all is open, including technology. All right. And I've already talked about those dates. All right. So now, what are the differences with the TKE? TKE, sort of like tech ethics is the way to think about that, is that it's focused specifically on technology and AI related questions. Okay. So it's things about, as we'll see, like whether it's good to have relationships with robots, whether AI is likely to be a force for good in the world or not. What happens with property rights when you have AI machines like making art and these kind of things? There's so many interesting questions on the technical side of all of this. So that's the TK ethics. And the structure in terms of the year goes like this. There's a fall event, there's a spring event, and then there's a grand final in the summer. And you get into the grand final by doing well at the fall or the spring. And this year also by doing well in the Pan-American Olympiad. All right. That will also get you access to this one. It'll be a whole different case set with a focus on technology. I should also clarify, going back to the Pan-American for 1 second, that anyone is allowed to come to that event. Absolutely anyone, but only school-based teams are able to qualify for the international final. And the difference is that with the TKE one, anyone is welcome, and you can get all the way through to the grand final and win the whole thing, even as a team made up of people from wherever in the world. Like, they don't have to be from the same school. Okay, I think that covers the key distinctions. You've got the dates on the screen. You can find all this information online. And yeah, we certainly hope you come to this upcoming Pan-American Ethics Olympiad next month. Okay. Let's talk about this presentation and then deliver one. All right. The presentation is 5 minutes long and you get 3 minutes to prepare for it. But the way you want to structure it has these 8 parts. And I should say again, this is, there are 1,000 ways to skin a cat, as the expression goes. So this is not necessary. You don't need to do this to win, all right? No judge has been told the team must have this exact format. It just turns out that this format has won like 3 of the 5, international finals. This structure does work, and it covers all the bases of the things you generally have to do when you're doing good philosophy. So you don't have to do it this way. This is a very good way to do it. Let me teach you it. There are 5 points that you get in the Olympiad for polite discourse. This is really a critical component of the whole thing. This is not debating. I don't know how many of you are debaters. Mars is a debater. I think Oriana's a debater. Almost certainly Zach and I, both debaters. All right, it's true. But there is a big difference in the tone of an Olympiad compared to a debate. I mean, at least in the style of debate that I did in high school, it wouldn't have been unreasonable to stand up and say, as aggressively as this, like, Judge, in this debate, the opponents have completely failed to explain their side of the topic, and they misunderstand every single thing we've said. That's why they're going to lose today. Like, that wouldn't be crazy, making the other team cry. It happens in debating. It's bad, but it happens. This style of competition is very relaxed, very polite. It more resembles a philosophy seminar room at a university. So even if you radically disagree with someone's position, you're going to phrase it in a very polite, calm way. You're going to say something like, oh, like, that was a really interesting point. I like the way you explained that. Could you just clarify, like, what would you say if someone objected by blah, 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 and then like phrasing your objection almost as a hypothetical. So that tone of being very calm in your discourse should permeate the entire competition, which is why the very first thing you do is thank everyone in the room. So you just say, thank you so much, Team B and Judge, for joining us for this really interesting ethical discussion. Okay, let's get into our case. Right? It's very quick, very easy. It's going to get you those 5 marks for polite discourse. Next, it could be the case, depending on how complex the topic is, that you need to clarify or define some key terms. This isn't always necessary. I don't think that Oriana and I are going to do it today. I think that the topic is pretty well established, but we might, let's see. But if you think that you need to clarify or define some key term, you do that at the beginning. Okay. Or if you want to like restrict the topic that you're discussing, particularly to a particular type, like a subset of the overall topic, maybe that's where you do it. Okay, now we get into the critical component that you must have. This is true for a lot of things in school, like in essay writing, right? You need to have a thesis. And a thesis in this case is just where you state the question that you've been given and your answer to the question in the most direct, simple way possible. So, is it good to have robot relationships? No, right? That's what we want to hear. A very straightforward thesis that's going to be the framework for the rest of your case and your presentation. Okay? Very simple. Nothing I've said so far is complicated. The next thing I'm going to say does get a little bit more complicated, okay? What you need to do after you've stated your basic thesis is you need to tell us what ethical perspective you're taking on the case, which really means which ethical theory are you going to be utilizing as the basis for your argumentation. So you should reflect to yourself, have I ever heard the term ethical theory? And if the answer is no, then I would say there is some Googling to do, and there's some looking at videos. You can come to our resource page, you can get training, right? There's a lot you can do to learn this stuff, but there are a few discrete terms and how they apply that you really do want to get your head around, because they're sort of going to be talked about, right? Whether you like it or not. And for a middle school or a junior Olympiad, it's not necessarily true, but for a senior Olympiad, yes, they will be discussed. So I'll tell you just a couple of them. We're not doing a lecture on ethical theory today, but one of the most famous ethical theories that you probably have heard of is this idea, utilitarianism, okay? Utilitarianism. This is a branch of an ethical theory that really is saying an action is good or right if it maximizes happiness. If the result, the consequences of your action are overall cause net positivity, increased happiness, or utility, that's what it's called in the theory, utility, but it really just means happiness, then that action was good. So if we're going to assess whether robot relationships are a good thing, then our ethical approach could be from the perspective of utilitarianism. So what we're trying to determine in order to answer the question properly, and what we're going to argue about, is whether or not having robot relationships increases happiness in the world. This is the most straightforward, basic way to approach most ethical cases. And most ethical questions do have this component of is the consequence a good or a bad thing? So this is a very straightforward and normal way to approach an ethical question. And I think it's something we do in our everyday lives. Should I go and, drop this bin bag off my top floor? Well, no, if I think about the consequences, it's probably a terrible idea. I don't know why that came to mind. I've never done that, I swear. Okay, so apart from utilitarianism, there's another classic approach to ethics. That is deontology. Okay, so these are the first two things you're going to Google if you've never heard any of this, and go look them up on YouTube. Deontology. This is the idea of having ethical principles that you kind of must not violate. And a lot of people tend to believe that these things sort of exist and are important in our ethical decision making. For instance, the idea of having a right to privacy. Some people would say that your right to privacy should be protected, even if violating it would have caused a better outcome in terms of utility. So there are sometimes these deontological principles that limit utility maximization. I know these are big words. You can get your head around this. If you've never heard about it, don't worry. You are going to be totally fine. Okay. You've presented your ethical theory now. You've picked one major kind of approach about whether you're going to focus on the consequences or you're going to focus on rights and responsibilities. Maybe you're going to focus on virtue ethics, a third theory, right? So you've set that up. Now you're going to get into your arguments. And this is actually the bulk of your presentation, is going to be presenting these arguments. And the arguments are essentially, they're directly related to whatever your theory was and your thesis is. So if your theory is utilitarianism and your answer is this thing is bad, then by necessity, your argument section is going to be why this thing is bad. Here are the 3 ways that this thing is really bad. Robot love is going to destroy our society in these 3 ways, right? Or however many ways. So that's the argument section, all right? And if your theory is about some deontological principle, like the right to privacy, for instance, or the right to autonomy or bodily autonomy, then you argue, and then you're saying that robot love is a good thing, then you get to argue why having these robots increase people's autonomy and their freedom, and therefore that's a good thing. Okay, so the arguments directly relate to the thesis and the theory. After that, we get to a super weird part, which is that you should have a counter argument to your own position. So a counter argument to your own position means you are literally going to present an argument against your own position. Okay, this argument, this counter argument, should be extremely strong. It should be a good counter argument. It should be powerful, and it should be the best counter argument you can think of. Because if you can't defend your own position against the best possible counter argument, then why do you hold that position in the first place, right? After that, you're going to discharge the counter argument. So yeah, you want to raise a strong counter argument, but you don't want to defeat your own case. So you do have to then say, okay, like while that argument is strong, we discharge it in such and such kind of way. Okay. And then you do a conclusion and you just state what you've argued. So we've argued that robot love is a really good thing. Thank you so much for this. Let's get directly into it. Here we go. Our topic is robot love. I'm going to read this very quickly, so pay close attention, but we need to get through it. So in July 2023, chatbot startup Replica announced a spin-off service called Blush, designed for users interested in romantic relationships with chatbots. With the app, users can converse with thousands of different customizable personas of an AI chatbot, each with their own backstory and way of dating. The chatbot combines scripted dialogue with a large language model, an LLM, a model trained on a large data set of writing to enable it to engage in conversation as if it were a human. Unlike many other chatbots, Blush allows its bots to engage in emotionally weighty and sexually explicit topics. With fewer and fewer young people dating and corresponding increase in loneliness, proponents of romantic chatbots have pointed out that technology like Blush could be a powerful tool against the epidemic of loneliness. Many Replica and Blush users agree, saying the chatbot has given them a sense of emotional and sexual fulfillment that felt unattainable in the real world. Moreover, Replica CEO and founder Eugenia Coita maintains that romantic relationships with AI can be a great stepping stone for actual romantic relationships, human relationships. On the other hand, critics highlight that many users are choosing romantic chatbots over real-world relationships. They argue romantic relationships with chatbots tailor-made for user satisfaction are missing important components of genuine love and human connection, even if they help reduce loneliness. For instance, unlike human beings, replica bots are designed to be agreeable and customizable to cater to their users' interests. We have 3 study questions. Okay, I'm going to actually leave them for you to read later when you get the case set. We already have a question we're going to discuss. Oriana and I are now going to set a 3-minute timer and prepare ourselves to give the presentation. Here is the question. Will robot relationships be a good thing for the world? Very straightforward. The most basic question we could ask. Will robot relationships be a good thing for the world? Oriana, what's your initial intuition?
Maybe it will be a good thing for the world. There's a lot of discussion about how people are getting lonelier these days, and it might be helpful. I also think that, honestly, anything that makes it easier for people to communicate would be beneficial for an individual. They can have more meaningful conversations. They can get exposed to, like, I guess they can interact with a greater number of people, or like, I guess, AI.
Nice. I'm happy to take that approach. So should we take a basic utilitarian, like consequentialist stance on this and ask, like, should that be our ethical theory?
That would be fun.
Okay, let's do that. We'll start with a thanks. We'll do I don't think we need to define any key terms, but our thesis will be it's a good thing. Okay, the theory is utilitarianism, and our arguments, as you just stated, are going to be things like people are getting lonely, right? People are getting lonely, and then this has all sorts of benefits.
Yeah, and we just think that more options are good.
Yeah, and like different strokes for different folks. Like different people are going to be into different things and have different needs. And for the people who can't develop a romantic relationship, it's probably okay. I think that's great. Do you want to give the argument section? In fact, yeah, can I give the first 3? You give the argument. Is that cool? And then we'll see what happens after that.
Okay. And then the counter argument.
I guess the most worrying thing about this might be the fact that it undermines human relationships, or
yeah, I think people might get a little bit dependent on it.
I've heard stories about this, like there's something in Japan of people already sort of like guys who never get into a relationship and just get hooked on these like pretty pre-AI chatbots. So it's only going to be worse with these ones. Undermine human relationships. Okay, and then the response to that is the discharge is like probably it's only a small percentage of people who are going to suffer this, and it's pretty unlikely that they would have been able to have a successful relationship anyway. So probably it just makes the world better.
Yeah, probably. I also think that like people get bored after a while. Like you could probably add that we often socialize with a variety of different people. Maybe people don't like exactly only rely on chatbots. Like they can obviously, I think the vast majority of people would likely use like a robot and like have human friends.
Yeah, totally. I already use GPT for certain conversations that, like, if no one's around, like, I'll have interactions with GPT that are fairly like human, really. Okay, do you want to do the argument and the counter argument? I'll do the first three and the last one. Does
Sure,
that work?
yeah, I can discuss the argument and the counter argument.
Awesome. That's 3 minutes. Let's get started with our 5-minute presentation. Okay, time starts now. Thank you so much, Judge and Team B, for joining us for this really, really interesting ethical discussion. We're really excited to get into it. So let's get straight on to our thesis. The question in today's case is, will robot relationships be a good thing for the world? And we're going to argue in this case that they will be a good thing. Okay, moving on to our theory. The ethical theory we're going to use to justify our arguments is basically utilitarianism. This is simply the view that an action is right if and only if it maximizes utility. And by utility, basically all we mean is human happiness. It's just well-being and maybe just like positive mental states. We don't have a really specific view on this, but if it makes the world better and happier, then it will have been a good thing and we should be justified in doing it. Okay, let's go on to our arguments now, and we'll try to demonstrate why having robot relationships will make the world a better place. Ariana.
Okay, so there's a couple of parts of our argument. The first is just that robot relationships are generally a good thing because people are getting lonelier. Due to a variety of causes such as the pandemic, there's also a lot of social anxiety involved and issues people need to work through. Talking to other people can be difficult. It's also just that some people have a harder time than others. We think that we can decrease this because just because you feel a little bit shy or you're experiencing loneliness doesn't mean you should be cut off from socialization. The point is robot relationships are good because people who are lonely, and which is a very alarming number growing at a very fast rate, are able to access genuine conversations with robots. There's more options for them. We also think that in general, robot chatbots would have really good benefits. We think that, first of all, there are more options for people to interact with. We think that this is very beneficial. After all, individuals often need some sort of socialization. You don't always talk to the same people, and at the same time, you can talk to your different friends about a variety of different topics. We think the same applies for a chatbot. That is simply one more friend that you can talk to. It is one more person you can build a very close relationship with. We think that as long as we are able to maximize these choices, that is good because we can also increase the likelihood that someone is able to have a very good conversation and feel very good about it afterwards. We also think that the level of personalization that chatbots can bring is very good for people. You are able to talk to someone who is aware of your feelings and can often acknowledge certain sensitivities that sometimes humans miss out on. So for all of these reasons, we think that robots would be much beneficial on an emotional level and to provide more options to make sure that people are less lonely and can make more connections. Now, there are counter arguments and some very valid concerns about whether or not robot chatbots could possibly be harmful. Notably, a counter argument that is brought up is that this undermines human relationships. That is because the more robots you have, the less need there is for people. And if we interact with people less, or if we normalize robots too much, this kind of takes away from the importance of human relationships. But I will let Archie address as to why this is not something to be extremely concerned about.
Okay, thank you so much, Ariana. So now I'll try to discharge that counter argument about the risks to humanity. So I think that there are some worries about AI for sure, but in general, this idea that we're going to have a huge shift away from human relationships, I think doesn't really reflect reality. I think human beings are very naturally guided towards human relationships. Just by our pure biology, the way our brains are set up, we are going to always want to love humans. However, there's like a subset of people who can't form those relationships for various different reasons, be they physical, emotional, psychological, mental. People with like difficult lives, particularly, they're the ones who end up not being able to find human relationships. So it's for them who this is so beneficial. And then for the rest of society, who maybe are like more functional in this regard, I think that they can have a pretty healthy relationship with these romantic or non-romantic relationship partners in chatbots. So like, I don't think it's unreasonable even for me sometimes to open up GPT and, given how good the voice mode has gotten, like have discussions about economics with it. That's like a type of sort of student-teacher relationship that you can develop. Like the romantic element isn't the only part of this that you could possibly have. So I think the idea that this is going to undermine human society to a high degree is quite unlikely and not a huge risk. And actually, the rewards for the people who otherwise suffer so much as a result of loneliness outweighs any of those potential risks. So we have argued here that we think relationships with robots is going to be overall a good thing for our society. Thank you so much. And Team B, we're looking forward to your commentary. So now let's talk briefly about the commentary. The commentary section is the 3 minutes Team B gets to ask Team A questions. First thing, it's not rebuttal. You don't need to disagree. There are many things you can do, though. First, you're going to thank Team A. Zach is going to thank us profusely. I'm not doing that for my own benefit. I'm doing that for his. He will get more points that way. Second, he's going to make sure that he summarizes the point that we made before he responds to it. Okay, so he's going to briefly say, like, you made this point about such and such a thing. Now I'd like to respond to it, or like, have you considered? And then he gives a response. This ensures that he is being responsive to something we said in our presentation and not making the big mistake of just presenting his own ideas and just saying, well, what I think is blah, blah, blah. That's not the point. That's not commentary. That's just another case. We want commentary. Now, here are the things that he can do in his commentary. One, he could point out if he thinks we have some kind of contradiction within our case. He could also, second, just ask for some clarifications. Like, you said this, but what exactly did you mean? Did you mean this or this? What about this other case? Like, just ask for clarification about, or maybe we didn't have a counter argument. And he could say, what would be your, like, what do you think is the strongest counter argument to your own position? Blah, blah, blah. He could also just himself point out another counter argument. So he could say, look, I thought your point about the loneliness of people is like really significant and interesting. Thank you for that. But I actually think I can raise another counter argument against that. Isn't it possible that, and then he's going to raise a counter argument. He's not taking it on as his own perspective and attacking our position. He's raising it as a hypothetical counter argument to help Team A with their position, which is really the goal of Team B. Or, and this is interesting, he could strengthen one of our points. He could actually say like, oh, that was really good. I love that point. Here's another example to actually support your position. That would be really cool as well. So the common mistakes people make here. One, just making a presentation without actually responding to what Team A said. That's a big mistake, and people do it all the time. And two is just agreeing with Team A without actually providing reasons. So sometimes we see beginner teams get up and go, oh, wow, Team A, that was amazing. We loved it. Wow, wow, wow. Round of applause. Good job. And then they sit down. And it's like, okay, that's not quite good enough either. You do have to contribute something to the round, philosophically speaking. You have to like press Team A in some direction to have, you know, like ideas clash and then come out with hopefully something better at the end of it. Okay, with that said, I'm going to let Zach give his commentary, and I'm going to flow, as in note take, Zach's commentary on my screen so Oriana and I are ready to respond to it. Alrighty, Zach.
Time will start now. First off, I'd like to thank Team A so much for their fascinating presentation. Lots of interesting arguments there for me to address. It was tough to narrow it down to just 3 points, but I think there are 3 things I'd like to talk about. In this speech, in this commentary, I'm going to address their argument about loneliness. I'll talk a little bit about the counter argument they raised, and then I'll raise another potential counter argument. So starting off with their argument about loneliness. Team A concluded from a utilitarian point of view that AI, romantic, and otherwise relationships will be good, largely because of a current epidemic of loneliness that they may address. So right now we have lots of loneliness, we have lots of anxiety, and their idea is that maybe these AI relationships will be solvent for that and will really sort of help people deal with that. I think this might be plausible, but one thing we have to consider is that this epidemic of loneliness is largely caused by technology and caused by the replacement of real human interaction with technological substitutes. So it strikes us that this is, their argument is very similar to one you could have made in the early aughts about smartphones or in the 2010s about social media. You could have said, people are lonely. This gives people new ways to connect. That's going to be amazing. That's going to make people happy. But what happened was just the opposite. What we've learned is that these technological substitutes are actually very poor substitutes, and they actually make people lonelier. So this is one thing that I think Team A should consider. Their counter-argument, moving on to our second point in this commentary, their counter-argument was about a risk that these AI relationships would undermine human relationships. And they discharged this fear by saying that it's only a small percentage of people who this risk would apply to, and it's mostly those who would. Did I cut out for a second there? Okay, everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, we think that this is a realistic concern, something we should be worried about. But we think, or this is a realistic response, but we don't think this does enough credit to the fact that there probably are some people at the margins. So there probably are some people who right now find it pretty difficult to get human relationships, especially romantic ones. But it's the only way to get to a lot of things they really want out of life. Romantic fulfillment, maybe marriage. So they have very strong incentives to go out into the real world, try hard, do things that are scary, like ask people on dates, and they're motivated and they go do that, and then eventually they end up in these relationships. For these people, there surely is a worry that AI relationships will totally replace whatever incentive would, in the status quo, in the normal counterfactual, get them to go do that hard work. And they may just end up with no relationships at all. The final point I'd like to make very quickly is another potential counterargument. Their counterargument, the counterargument of Team A, was based on the idea of AI relationships being pretty good, but not a real substitute. I think there's another fear, which is that they're so good that they're even better than real human relationships. They just get perfect. They get addictive. You have this like perfect partner that listens to you, that cares about you, that's better in every possible way. And this might make people happy, but we think then you also have to consider the second order effects. What does a world look like if 95% of romantic relationships are human to AI? People aren't forming families. People aren't having real relationships in the world. People stop interacting with each other wholesale. Again, great presentation by Team A. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say in your response.
We now have 1 minute to plan our response. I think the response section, there's not that much like lecturing I need to give to you about this, really. I mean, we're obviously going to thank, as always, and we have a lot to thank for with Zach there. That was obviously really good. And then we're going to do a bit of flagging. So we're going to try to say like, look, we said this, you responded like this, and now we're going to respond to you. And the way we respond to Zach can be a plethora of things. We could agree with him. We might try to justify our initial position. We could do anything we want with Zach's presentation, as you're about to hear. Okay, Ariana, we have 1 minute. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, time starts now. Okay, all of his points are really good. That we have to take them all seriously. Do you have a specific response to any of them that you'd like to give?
I think people still talk to people. I think probably evolution still requires organisms to interact with each other. Like this is going to take 1,000,000 years for a really scary paradigm to shift. So I think we can just take on the third response very quickly with that. In terms of the loneliness issue, I think the issue with loneliness is uniquely, we should point out that the problem in the status quo is that people have no outlet of communication whatsoever. I think AI or chatbots are the ones that provide some sort of communication. The problem is in the status quo, people don't feel comfortable talking to others or there's no one to talk to. This is the better alternative than like leaving people like hanging.
Can I try to do that one to draw a disanalogy between the two things?
Of course.
The phone one? Okay, and then the second one, we have 4 seconds. I'll have a go, and then you can jump in if I don't get it. Okay, here we go. That's time. Okay. Thank you so much, Zach, for that wonderful commentary. There's so much to get into there. I think we should go straight for it. Okay, so this first point. We talked about the idea that these chatbots are important because there's an epidemic of loneliness. And you make the really interesting comment that what if it's the case that this loneliness is actually caused by technology? I think, and you get the great example of like, couldn't we have made this argument in like 2001 when smartphones are coming out, and we would have thought, or social media, Facebook might be another great example of this. It's connecting people. Turns out it actually makes people more anxious, depressed, and lonely. Probably, like that seems to be the best evidence. We agree. I think that the response we have to give here is that AI is actually, and this might fall into the trap of your third response, but I think AI is different and it is better. I think it is so much more human and responsive and interactive and can be trained and modeled in such unique ways that it's not like the base algorithms of Facebook that are just like pumping you with like emotional content that might make you angry. Like, no, it actually will be designed to give you a fulfilling conversation and experience and relationship and life. So still, for those people who suffer the problems of loneliness, this might actually bring about a significant change. And I kind of like the idea that you can learn from these chatbots, if they're trained properly, how to interact with actual people. And because they're so accurate, that it might give you the tools to go out and interact with people, whereas playing video games or these other technologies never really gave you the capacity to do that. So I like to think that there are some differences here that might make it worth it from a utilitarian perspective. Okay, on the second point, we had a counter argument. We said, what if it undermines human relationships? And then we said, but probably this is a small number of people. You respond, but aren't there these people like on the margin who they will, otherwise they would have found a relationship, but it would have taken a lot of work and now they won't? I think we have to admit that there are some of those people. Of course, like there are people on all sorts of margins. I guess from our perspective, the number of people who are just like fall into that category of totally lonely, never going to make their way out, those people are probably suffering more and will be benefited overall on net more if we give them the capacity to have some kind of relationship. And those people on the margins, even if it shifts it by 1%, hopefully won't be the biggest problem. Oriana, to respond to the third point.
All right, so the third point that we said to our counter argument was that this likely does not become a real substitute. There's still going to be human relationships. Zach comes up with a really good response, and that is, well, if this is so good, then people would just use AI and give up on finding human relationships in the first place. I think our response to this is just very simple. Human relationships take place and organisms interact with each other because it's evolutionary and biologically favorable for them to do so. This paradigm shift doesn't just occur in one generation. It will take millions upon millions of years for humans to fully abandon each other. That's to say, we're biologically driven to still want to interact with humans. AI is just another option for human communication. Thank you, Zach, for helping us improve our case, and we look forward to judges' questions.
Okay, on to judges' questions. I'll talk about this a little bit. It'll be funny though if I can't do well under the pressure of Mars's questions, because I'm a little worried about that. But in judges' questions, you could get people asking really tough stuff that you don't know how to respond to. Here are some strategies. Number one, don't immediately respond. So, and this is actually really important. In a round, you are going to have no ability to go into a breakout room. So just like this, right? I would have to have a back channel of communication with Oriana. So we would have a call going, we might have a Discord chat going in the side, or we'd be in the same room. Obviously, if you're at the same school and you want to go together, like that's great as well. But you need some way of communicating with each other, not on the main Zoom. Because for this 30-second period and for all of your interim periods, right? Your discussion periods before your presentations and your commentary, you want to talk to each other. And that's true here as well. So you need to have that back channel. We don't have that. We'll do it in front of you. So take 30 seconds, discuss, don't just jump into a response if you don't know what to say. And then also, these are almost all, Zach, you can correct me, but almost all like master's or PhD students who we have judging at our competition. That means that they are all brilliant at philosophy. And that means that if they choose to, they will be able to ask you questions that press you to your limits, you know, of your arguments. They'll be really, really good. And if that's the case, you don't have to sort of fight them on it. You can just be like, wow, that is a really good point. We actually don't know exactly how to respond to that. Can you, or even like, can you ask that question in a slightly different way that like we'll be better able to understand? Or even, Judge, we don't know how to respond to that. Like, how would you respond to that? Like, can you give us a hint about what we should do? My point is that the judge's question is not a point where you're arguing with a judge. It's a point where you're having a philosophical discussion with a brilliant philosopher. And that means if you get stumped, you admit that you're stumped. and it's totally fine. That's why you don't need to be afraid or worried about this section of the competition or the event. Okay, judges' questions. Let's do 7 minutes. Here we go.
Great.
When you're ready, Mats.
All right, thank you for your excellent presentations. I have a couple of questions. The first is on your theory. I think the choice of utilitarianism was a good one. I am curious if we could make that more specific. So 2 kinds of utilitarianism would be, one is maximizing the average utility of the people that exist now. Another would be maximizing the total utility of humans that exist now and into the future, where the number of people in the future would contribute positively to that. Which one is closer to what your team had in mind, and what would the implication be for your case?
I think I've got a response for this, Ariana. So I might jump in. Okay, thank you so much, Mats. Really, really good distinction, and an important one that perhaps we should have addressed in our initial presentation. I think we don't have any principled reason to rule out future life in our utility calculus. I think we are concerned about them as well. And the implication, but I don't think, I mean, we never discussed that actually in our plans for this, but I think that works for us. And the reason is that the reason this would impact our presentation is if you could demonstrate one of the points that Zach made, which is that this would actually cause potentially the wipeout of humanity because we no longer wanted to procreate, because we just wanted to end our lives interacting with these beautiful, perfect, romantic robots. If that were the case, then that would undermine the capacity for future life. And that would be a really big problem for us. And I think we would just admit that would be probably a problem for us. I don't think we would love the idea of a world without humans and where only the robots remain. I think that there is value in future life and continuing that. So if you could demonstrate that point, it would be a problem. I don't think you can demonstrate that. I think it's highly unlikely, as Ariana said in her response, that eventuality would take place, which is why we're not too concerned about it.
Very thoughtful. The next thing I want to ask about is a policy implication or a possible additional thought on top of just, do these relationships exist? So a lot of critics of technology have noted that digital assistants like Siri, Cortana, Alexa are overwhelmingly female, and how that might set bad norms when they are always subservient. Do you think there should be restrictions on how deferent or compliant these digital relationship partners can become?
Well, can we have 30 seconds to discuss that before we answer?
Absolutely.
Thanks. We'll have to do that in here out loud. Ariana, what do you think about that? Do you have a take?
I think that's very difficult. I know a lot of things just let you set your own preferences, and it's kind of a weird restriction to place upon people. Like there's some people who just maybe like the sound of one voice better than another. And it's very difficult to place hard limits on what your chatbot can actually do.
I mean, but imagine we could change the models, and we could be like, look, if it's a woman chatbot, it can't be 100% deferential because this sets bad precedent for real human interactions. Should we do that?
I'm kind of against that. I find that idea very uncomfortable, saying that we're just going to assign different roles to different people, different perceptions of what society might think of someone.
Okay, do you want to try and respond to this?
I can try to take a crack at it. Okay.
Nice. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Generally speaking, on a very broad level, we think that it would not be in the best interest of society to set very hard limits on what your chatbot can actually do. We think first and foremost, a chatbot is trained off of a lot of data, and we think that data is in general very helpful to enhance user experiences. And we think only can a chatbot improve and use a lot of the data and build to its fullest potential can the chatbot actually get better and eventually decreasing the amount of bias that occurs or harmful attitudes. I would also say that the more we try to regulate what chatbots can do, and specifically if we're trying to target a harmful image for example, of certain chatbot voices based on gender stereotypes. I think we exacerbate and bring unnecessary attention to the issue. I think subconsciously most people don't think about chatbots like this, and we don't want to like introduce this issue as another way of thinking about it if this problem doesn't exist as prominently in the status quo.
Right. I appreciate the very clear stance. One last question. This concerns your argumentation. So back and forth throughout the argument, comment, and response is the degree to which this will lead to people not having human communication anymore. You gave arguments about how we're evolutionarily coded to see human behavior, but simultaneously argue that these robots could get rid of loneliness. What is your evidence or reasoning that these robots will thread the needle where they are satisfying our need to not be lonely, but not satisfying our other social needs?
Okay, we'll need 30 seconds to discuss that one. I mean, he's totally right. There is a bit of a problem there, isn't there?
Yeah.
I mean, because are they going to be that good? I mean, I think as a matter of fact, they will be that good. I just think like they won't. Maybe there's like for a lot of people, like getting most of a human relationship is better than having none. But also the reason it threads the line is that the biological drive to procreate is too strong, but that's not true for everyone anyway. But
I think this conversation also splits into different groups of people. I think
Yeah,
a lot
exactly.
of people are very uncomfortable with too much technology in the first place. So we can say that we can try to break this down into groups. I think we can also say that two things can be true at the same time. Humans as a general species do have a biological drive to procreate. Cooperation and interaction does help progress the human species and has helped survival for a long time. And we can also say that there are some outliers, and that even if it's just an outlier, or even if we do believe that loneliness is going to be solved, this is a very short-term issue, and we think that this short-term solution is still good for the future.
Ariana, we've run out of time. Thank God. Thank God we don't have to answer that. Okay. We're so sorry, Judge. We just ran out of time. We just got to the end of our discussion, and we're really sorry we can't answer that question. It was brilliant.
Absolutely fine. Thank you for the presentation, and I hope you'll continue pondering the question.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Oh, wow. Cool. That was exciting. It's rare that I get to do like an entire round under competition circumstances. Not quite that, but wow, how exciting. Thank you so much, Mars. Thank you so much, Ariana, for your contributions. That was just unbelievable. It's going to be, I think super valuable to everyone watching to have heard you guys do that. So massive thanks. And Zach, of course, but we both run this together. So we're both thanking them. I'm thanking them collectively on behalf of us. There's one more question in the chat that I want to respond to. That is from the anonymous attendee who says, are we going to be in just one room for the entire day? I'll try to I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, but basically you're going to come in, big Zoom room, 120 people in there. Then the Zoom rooms are going to open, the breakout rooms, right? And then you're going to go into the breakout room, and then you're in then you're in the breakout room with team A, team B, and the judge. You do one whole round there, like all the way through what we did, and then you flip sides and then do it again. And then at the end of that round, you all go back into the main room, and then you get your next, or you get a little break, and then you get your next room assignments with another team, a different team, and a different judge. And you go there and you do the same thing. You do that 4 times, and then the day is over. Is it online? Yes. It's hard to get put into Zoom breakout rooms in person. Yes, it is online, meaning you can participate from anywhere. Cool. That was another question we just got. During the online competition, will we be broken up into breakout rooms? Yes, you will. Yeah, precisely. When you do your presentation, there's going to be like 10, 15 breakout rooms. You'll be in one of them, not for the whole thing, but for one round. And then you come back, and then you go into a different room for the next round. Okay, so here we go. Go on.
I can this one. So the anonymous attendee asks, great question. It is still not clear to me during the 5 minutes or the 3 minutes for team A, multiple speakers can share the time. Same goes for team B for their 3 minutes. More than one teammate can share the speaking time. Absolutely. So teams will be composed of multiple members. and they can distribute their speaking time within each speech however they want. So most teams split it up somewhat equitably between 3 or 4 members. You don't have to. One teammate could give the entire speech. It's pretty uncommon, but that is entirely up to the team and what they decide and how they want to run each individual speech. And anything to add, Archie?
That's exactly right. So I'm just trying to make sure we got every element of this question. Like, so they're saying during the 5-minute presentation or the 3-minute response, I assume that's the meaning there, multiple speakers can share the time. Yes, anyone can speak at any point. Team B, for their 3 minutes, anyone can speak. Yeah, but there's no requirement. Just, Zach, you phrased it perfect. Okay, I hope that's clear. If most of your team don't show up, that's a sad eventuality. I hope it doesn't happen. Will you still be able to present? We probably wouldn't kick anyone out if only one member of a team showed up and they still wanted to compete. I think we would just let them, but probably wouldn't be available to get prizes or like to win the competition or proceed to the. That's actually an interesting question. Zach, do you have an intuition here? We've never had that happen.
We had a team that ended up with one for a similar reason, and they competed, but would have been ineligible for prizes. The real answer is obviously we don't want to turn anyone away. Like if someone's there and they want to do philosophy and they registered and they're there and they want to be competing, of course we want everyone to compete. I mean, I think the big point is it's going to be really, really hard to be successful in a tournament like this if you are going at it alone. So ideally, you would get a team that can all commit to going.
Yeah.
Next 2 questions are about breaks. I can take this. So within the heat, there are 2 rounds. Each team will do everything. So Team A presents, then Team B commentary, then Team A response, Team A judges questions. That's what we just showed you. That's 1 round. And then the 2 sides would switch, and there'd be a new case. Within the heat, there is no break. So the judge's questions for round 1 ends. Then the judge will flip to a new case, read it out loud, and you guys will do the same thing all over again, just on the different sides. In between each heat, so you're in the breakout room with another team and a judge, you do 2 rounds, you come back into the main room, then you'll have, after extensive feedback from the judge, our judges all give very, very good feedback for 5 to 10 minutes. Then you'll have 15, 20 minutes of a break before the next round. So there are breaks in between each round. Yes.
We actually have the schedule for the Pan-Am. It actually should be somewhere. If you want to try and find it, Zach, it might be useful for people.
Yes, I can share my screen to it right now if you'd like.
You have it open right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure. Go for it. You have sharing ability? There you go.
So this is on the invitation, which I think should have been sent to everyone in the invitation to this as well. But I can post the link to this in the chat too. So the event schedule, this is all in Eastern Standard, but so we would have beginning, and then each round is a total of 1 hour 20, which includes feedback, and then is followed by a 10-minute break. There's a lot of wiggle room built into this, though. The round often won't take a full, will take about 1 hour, then you'll get 10 minutes of feedback, then you might end up with a 20-minute break. But so each round is followed by at least a 10-minute break, assuming the longest possible round, longest possible feedback time. You'll still have 10 minutes between that and your next round. And then we have a 40-minute break after round 2 for lunch, which makes sense as a lunch break in Pacific time.
Otherwise, it's just, maybe we should change that to a food break, but yeah.
Food break, yeah.
Okay, I think, and then people know where to find this now. Maybe if Zoe or you could somehow get it in the chat.
Right now in the chat, yeah.
Cool. Okay, how long is the break? So that's the break question. If it's online, how will you know if someone's reading off something? Okay, so as I said, we don't know 100%. If someone's very good at reading content, fine. It's actually not a problem for us. You are allowed to read. That's why we don't set the rule, because it's hard to know. But most often, when someone is reading, it kind of is obvious. And then we're not going to immediately be like, oh, you get a 0. It's not a rule. There's no rule against it. If your presentation is otherwise perfect, That's great. The problem is, normally, if you're reading something pre-prepared and the question is at all different to the one you prepared, it's not going to sound right, is it? And also, okay, I mean, we actually probably do need a policy for this. But again, it's unenforceable. So I'm not sure what Zach and I need to think about this a little bit, but for GPT, right? Because you can just plug any of this into GPT. The problem with that will be GPT is very obvious to spot. All the people involved here have played around with that stuff so much. I do debate coaching also for a living. Zach and I both do, right? We do a lot of like public forum debating. It's extremely obvious when a student is reading from GPT. GPT just does produce something in a specific style with a specific cadence, with particular types of pairings. So we would know, we would 99% know that you are reading from GPT. And that, I mean, it just won't be a good presentation.
Yeah, I mean, we'll know, and the judges are instructed to not respond great to that, because obviously it sort of counts against your skill as a philosopher if you're reading off something that you didn't produce in a very obvious way. But I'll also just add that what we're looking for and what we've described to you all today is pretty specific and niche and difficult.
Yeah.
And GPT just will not produce something as good as a top team that thinks about these things for themselves and does prep with each other and then comes up with an answer on the spot and then tries their best to deliver it in real time. That will just be a better ultimate delivery and product than anything a chatbot writes.
And it would be quite ironic to essentially cheat in an ethics competition. I mean, that would just be the peak of irony. So at the very least, if you don't want to fall into that trap, then don't do it. Okay, next one. I saw you take a moment before responding to the judge. You suggested 30 seconds, but went a lot longer. How much time do you have to contemplate a question before answering a judge? This is a good question. There are, as maybe you saw, there just aren't strict rules about these things. There are strict timings in terms of you can only go for 7 minutes for judges' questions, fine. Within that, honestly, I think if a judge asked a sufficiently complicated question, the team spent a minute and a half thinking of a response and then gave a 3-minute response and it was one question, one answer with some thinking time, I would see no problem with that. It's so case dependent. You've essentially asked how long is a piece of string. There is no good answer to that. Obviously, if it looks like you're really fumbling and you're like, you have no idea what to do and you're like, you sit there for 4 minutes, then it's probably going to count against your judge's questions. But there's a huge range and it just depends on the situation. Zach, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add, I think that in Archie and Oriana's judges' questions, which was generally really good, I don't think the problem there was that they talked for a minute. I think the problem was that they talked until the very end without giving the judge any kind of answer, like if there was a problem. So I would say like it's not really the duration, but if you're coming toward that 7 minute, you're gonna have a timer on the screen. If that's getting close to 7 minutes, you've been talking for 45 seconds, get something in for the judge, right? Like the judge has asked you a question, then you've all muted yourselves and you're on Discord and the judge has just watched your mouths move, and they're sort of sitting there wondering what's gonna happen next. And like continue the conversation, even if just unmute and say, look, we find that question super hard. Here's what we talked about, but we weren't able to achieve like a super satisfactory answer, but here's kind of how our conversation just went. That would be completely satisfactory, I think.
Yeah, we did. That last question was so good from Mars. That was a great example of like getting totally stumped. Okay, do you want to take the next one? Hypothetically?
Hypothetically, if someone needs to leave for an appointment or other duty during the event, then what would happen? So if it's a team of 5 students, this isn't a huge problem. Like you'll be missed, I'm sure, by your teammates, but a team of 4 can continue to do the rounds without you, and then you can come back when you're done your commitment and rejoin. Basically, this is problematic if it leaves like 1 or 2 team members left, but yes, the team is. But to answer just the specific question, the team is allowed to go on if they lose a member.
Yeah,
they are allowed to go on, as long as they're still an eligible team, number of team members left.
Yeah, exactly. And if you participated in even one round, you are going to be able to also, if your team wins, you will be eligible then to come to the final as well. We're not like, we're essentially not exceedingly strict on those kinds of questions. But as we've said, I think if a team had 2 members for like more than one round, we'd have to really try to avoid that. Always try to have 3 members in the room minimum. That would be the gold standard. Are you allowed to request the judge 30 seconds to discuss with your teammates to respond? Also, was Zach on Archie and Oriana's team? No. So yes, you're allowed to ask for 30 seconds to respond. That's a really good idea, as we demonstrated. Zach was not on our team. He was on team B. So he gave the commentary to our case. And if you go back and watch, we'll send this recording out. If you go back and watch this, you will see that Zach was asking questions that were like pressing us, right? He was asking difficult questions about our case. So no, he was on team B. If we were in a real round, he would then be on team A, or him and his team, right? He would have a full team, right? He'd be on team A, and then he would give a presentation on a new topic, and we would be team B, and we would be commenting on his. You want to take the next one?
Yeah, this next question is a great question from the Zendaya Holland. So I'm just
Whoa,
quite
she's
honored.
here?
Yeah,
She's gonna
right in the
I hope
room.
she'll be Spider-Man. That's so cool.
That'd be a big boon for us, hey? So the question is, I know that we get the sheet beforehand stating the different topics, but will all of these topics be chosen? And if not, do we get to choose the topic? I also know that we prepare beforehand, but what does that preparation look like? These are 2 great questions.
Wow.
So in response to the first question, the case set has 8 cases. There are 4 heats. Within each heat, 2 cases are dealt with. So throughout the course of the day, you will talk about all cases. You will you will present on 4 of the cases, and you will be the commentary team on 4 of the cases. All 8 of them will be done, and you'll participate in. And there's no way to decide. You'll call a coin flip, but you don't see which cases the heat has ahead of time. So there's no way to figure out which ones or determine which ones you will be presenting on or giving commentary to. But yes, you will end up having rounds with all 8 cases, 4 as presentation, the presenting team, 4 as the commentary team. The second question, get to prepare beforehand, but what does that preparation look like? Well, you're going to have the cases, and you're going to have the cases often, weeks or even longer in advance, right? If you registered 3 weeks ago, you had the cases 2 months before this tournament. And those cases, each of them raises a difficult and interesting ethical dilemma, and each of them has a few practice questions. And so the long-term preparation plan would be to study those cases with your team, think about those practice questions, and think about how you would build presentations for a variety of questions, as well as trying to identify what is the key ethical issue in each case, and what does your team generally want to say about it in a way that can be flexible to a variety of questions. So generally, what theories do you think are applicable? And generally, what counter arguments do you think are applicable? And like figuring out what is the core issue and what's your general strategy is often the key to good prep. Yeah, Archie.
One way to approximate that exact thing is to, when you get the case, don't even look at the question, or you should read the questions first. But when you're first discussing it, pick what would be the most straightforward version of the question. So are robot relationships good? Boom. That's the most simple, right? Should this person do this thing? Yes or no, right? Pick the very most standard, because once you have that framework of generally how you think about the case and the general counter arguments, you're pretty well set for most questions that come up. It's unlikely that it's going to be like so unrelated to the main topic that that doesn't help you. So that's how you should begin. I would do practice rounds as well if you have 2 teams. Or by the way, if you want to meet up with another team to do practice rounds before the competition, there are ways to do that. Contact us. We'll put you in touch and see if other teams want to do like little dry runs with you. There's lots of ways to practice. Also, we run we do run preparation classes for this as well. So if you want to take classes, there are ways to do that as well. You just have to message us. And yeah, we run full intro classes for total beginners. We run competition prep classes and all sorts. And then hopefully your school has some version of a club or a coach there who you'll meet weekly with in order to do this. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Next question. We signed up for the Western Australian competition. That's where I'm from. I think I know who you guys are. Will there be any key differences? Basically, no, just you can't use notes, but everything else we've described is identical. Yeah. Would you get kicked out if you do? I assume we're talking about notes. No, nothing will get you kicked out of it. Oh, AI, nothing will get you kicked out of the tournament. You will be given 4 scores, and you will be probably a judge would say, hey, look, I think you might have been using it. I really don't think you should. They'll have given you a bad score, but that's it. We don't kick people out. To get kicked out of this competition, there's probably
It'd
there.
have to be conduct. You'd have to do something that would make us give you, a -10 out of 5 for that polite discourse part of the judges.
Yeah, profanity, like probably like racism, bigotry, these kind of like really explicit, or putting something horrible on your screen. All of this would get you kicked out, but basically nothing else.
What happens if someone is accused of GPT when they are truly genuine? They won't be. We won't. I don't think anyone's going to get accused of using GPT. If you give a presentation that seems like it's being read from something, or that seems dry, or that lacks the elements of like an organic quality presentation, the judge will score you worse. But like I said, there's no explicit penalties, so it's not like there's going to be a moment where the judge says you have been docked 10 points for using GPT, and then you'll contest that.
Yeah, but if you think about it this way, let's say you weren't using GPT, but you were going, there are 3 approaches to this topic, and these 3 approaches are as follows. Like, as if it's just as bad as GPT would produce. Well, then you're just going to get scored for having done like an average presentation that sounded non-specific and too general, right? So there won't be this moment at all. In fact, like that's almost a risk of like, maybe we just shouldn't accuse anyone of using GPT, but just mark badly for bad presentations and leave it at that. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Thank you, Benson.
If there is an internet problem, what will happen? Like someone can't hear what the other team is saying. Great question. So we cover this with all of our judges. We really don't want any team to lose or have a bad round or be just unduly stressed out by normal technical problems that happen all the time. Like as people whose entire careers take place on Zoom, we really understand that stuff does happen. So the answer to that is that we have built in Slack into the schedule to account for these sorts of things. So the judges are instructed to give 5-10 minutes to resolve technical problems if that's necessary. And then if things last longer than that, then we have to look at other creative solutions. Worst case scenario, maybe your team goes on without you for that round. But yeah, everything about the way we run the tournament is designed to make it so that people can compete and, you guys can all compete in good faith as best you can, try hard and participate. And nothing silly gets in the way of doing that, like dropping out of Zoom or the team not hearing you for a few seconds.
If there's like a citywide blackout and you guys are out for the rest of the day and all of you disappear in the click of the thing and you never come back for the competition, obviously that's like extenuating and there's not much we can do about it. But yeah, we'll be maximally flexible. Question. If there's an internet problem, what will happen? Oh, like someone can't hear. So you can call in. Surely we've all been on Zoom long enough to like know that there are solutions to these things. Judges will know. Zach and I will be there, but not be judging. We can come and help you. Like there's a million solutions. And we'll spend the time to fix those technicals and we'll help you. Okay.
So do you do the conferring privately on Discord? The judges and other teams doesn't hear you. In a debate tournament, which this is not, the judges in the rooms can hear the prep. Would that be a bad thing, the way judges hear your thought process to their question? Yeah, so it's a good point. Generally, the way that the discussion periods, so there's a 2-minute discussion before the presentation, and then 1 minute of discussion or conference time before each of the commentary and the response. And then as you saw, you can also confer a little bit during judges' questions. Generally, what teams do is they'll mute themselves and they'll have a voice chat channel open on something like Discord so that they can talk to each other and plan that stuff out during those conference periods. We don't have a rule against just doing it in the room. Probably for your presentation, it might not be a good idea competitively because it would give your opponents a lead on what you're going to say. But yeah, that is generally how teams handle conference time.
I would say you should not have that discussion in front of the judge. Normally it's a bit more frantic and a bit more like you just want to give them what you mean to present to them. I would just do it privately. Again, not a rule, but like that's very much the norm. So yeah, do it privately. Where can we get the video? This video, the video of this, is it email? Yeah, we'll publish it everywhere, right? We'll send it by email to everyone who is here and probably just in general. If you don't get it in like let's say 2 days, you can email us and ask for it specifically. We'll probably post it on our website. We'll post it on our YouTube. It'll be all over the place. You can follow us on Instagram. I should have said that at the beginning. At Modus Pwn, and I'll be posting it there as well, by the way. And that will be at MPI_Ethics Olympiad. MPI_Ethics Olympiad. You can see all of our updates there as well. Okay. Is there only two people? Yeah. We sort of answered this. We're a little flexible if it's for random reasons that you can't control. A team member drops out. It's half a round where it's 2 people. Fine. If you only register 2 people for the competition, we just won't let you in. Like it's teams of 3 to 5. So yeah. Zach, do you want to add?
Yeah, so I don't know that's sufficient. The next one, would the judges clarify what the case study is about by going into detail of what the case study means if asked? Or would the speakers get to determine how it goes? For example, robot love, maybe team A thought it was about people having the passion to create robots, but team B thought it was about relationships. What would happen? Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think in that example, like if you just defer to the actual content of the case, it's talking about romantic relationships with chatbots. So that's then what you should be responding to. That's what your presentation should be about. But in general, yeah, the judges will not clarify. The judges, a case will be read and a question will be presented, and then team A and B are really off to the races to dictate exactly how the discussion goes. But no, it's not the judge's job to direct you or like clarify, inform the case for you in any way. So it will be up to you guys. And that is the sort of thing that, if handled well, can be the subjective part of the commentary and part of the response. You guys interpreted the question like this. We think what you said was really interesting, but we think there's another question to be asked that's related to the case, which is this. And then maybe you end up talking about multiple interpretations or talking about which interpretation is more reasonable. Often it won't be that ambiguous, but yeah, deference to the competitors on this.
Good answer.
Question from Ted.
Oh, yeah. Suppose a judge is cross-examining Team A's response to Team B's questions. Okay. Though the point is to have a conversation with Team A judge is permitted to ask Team B questions about their questions to Team A, or to encourage Team A and Team B to talk to one another during 7 minutes if it seems appropriate or valuable. No. It's purely for Team A.
What the judge could do is the judge could say, Team B raised something really interesting in their commentary, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you would respond to it. They could ask that to Team A. Say, Team B raised this idea. You responded this way, but I actually don't think that got to the core of it. How would you respond to this part of Team B? And so you can sort of, in judges' questions, try and get Team A to interact more directly with some of Team B's material. You can try and get A to do whatever you want in judges' questions. But yeah, there is no direct dialogue with the commentary team and the judge, and there's no direct dialogue between the commentary team and the presentation team within the round. Good. Will you send everyone the schedule? Yeah, I actually have sent the invitation in the chat. So if you look at the most recent message in the big chat, that is the invitation, which has the schedule on it.
And apart from that, we will be sending, once the registration closes, particularly, we'll be sending everyone who's registered another email giving you the details, the Zoom link, everything. But as soon as you register, within like 24 hours, you should have the cases though. If you don't have the cases, get in touch with us.
There will be...
Yeah, go on. Sorry. Yeah. How many judges will there be? No, go ahead.
Sorry. How many judges will there be? There will be 1 judge in each round. We will have 1 super qualified and trained judge in each round. The overwhelming majority of them have now judged multiple Olympiads. All of them have postgraduate experience in philosophy. Like the least qualified judge you will encounter on the day will have at least a bachelor's degree in philosophy as well as further academic experience. So it's an exceptionally talented and impressive pool. We're really, really proud of the quality of our judges. But yeah, each round is going to have one judge, judge the whole round, give you guys extensive feedback.
And we also train our judges even between events to ensure that any problems that happen, even between rounds, we try to get the judging, because like we were both competitive debaters and did Olympiad. Well, I did Olympiads. We've done every speech and debate competition under the sun, and the only thing that we hate about them is when you lose because of bad judging, or like, you think the judging wasn't done seriously, they didn't pay attention and stuff. We avoid that at all costs. Okay, to brag about the judges. Okay, finally, I missed the first 10 minutes. There will be a recording of this, by the way, that you can go back to. But let's see. Will one of the following cases assign to the team, or the team chooses in advance? This was answered, but the cases are, there are 4 rounds. You're going to go in, they're going to do a coin toss. The winner of the coin toss chooses team A or team B before you know what case it is. Then the judge clicks next, and these cases are predetermined before the tournament begins in a random order, not 1 through 8, but yeah. And then they click next, and then one of the cases will pop up, and there'll be a question associated with it. So you won't get to choose, and you get to call whether you're team A or team B if you win the coin toss, but you don't know what that means in terms of what case you're doing. So it's random. You need to prepare all of them. And so in each room there's team A and team B. They will each get a single case. I hope that I think that this question reveals a bit of a misunderstanding somehow about the thing at the beginning, right?
Yeah, the simplest way to respond to this is that there will be each competing team on the day of the tournament will do 8 total rounds, 1 for each of these 8 cases. In 4 of those rounds, you will be the presenting team, what Archie and Oriana did today. In 4 of those rounds, you will be the commentary team, what I did today. But you will deal with every case. You have to prep every case, and you really get no say over the matter of when you talk about what.
Wow, we did it. We got to the end of the questions. So unless the last 16 people in here have questions, in which case go for it. Otherwise, well, we might, honestly, in 2 minutes, if we don't have a question, we'll just call it as well, because these 15 people might be taking a bath or something. Not on their computers. Oh, one more. Thank you. This was really valuable. No worries. Thanks for coming.
Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you all at the events in the future.